Yeah, there. Maybe. Go ahead and talk. Let me see.
Okay. So the next part, so I'm unmuted, but now I can't.
Oh, wait, just a sec. Now try it.
Yeah.
There. I had to put my cursor back on
Right.
this slide.
So another area that I oversee is around attendance. So a little bit about attendance reports that I pull every Monday. One of those is looking at 7 or more unexcused absences. And so today I spent time just looking at who those students are, going into Skyward, thinking about, okay, what is their reason for their excused or their absence? Some of them are excused, some of them are unexcused. And then I reach out to counselors as well as the assistant principals to kind of, hey, this kid's getting a lot of attendance going. They're not on track to graduate. Let's reach out to families to figure out what barrier we need to remove around that. And then again, along that with that, the mental health attendance report as well.
What's the number 7? It's just a number you picked.
7, that's law. At
Okay.
7 or more unexcused absences, we have to reach out to families and set up a meeting and discuss barriers.
Is that cumulative for the school year, or is that on some type of
Yeah,
basis?
cumulative.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So from there, sometimes we, and once we meet with families, we talk about, okay, this in-person learning is just not what's working for my child. Can I put them in AOP for a short time or longer? So just talking about some different options that maybe families aren't aware of that they could have if in-person learning isn't what's best for them at this time. And then we have the community engagement board that I oversee. Moving into truancy, you know, if we have reached out to a number of times, their child's still not coming. We've met with them through community engagement board, imploded some resources out there. What we have found working with the Snohomish County Juvenile Court around case management is they want us to file truancy at that point, because then that brings these families up in their mind, and then they reach out to families to try to re-engage them in school before the family actually has to go to court. So it's that step between we filing truancy and then they get a court date. So trying to reach out to families to see what they can do from the juvenile court system to help them.
Okay, ballpark, how many kids are you reaching out to at this stage?
Just with the attendance
Yeah,
reports,
like your 7.
there are about 20-ish. Yeah,
Is it-
mostly at the high school level. And that's unexcused. So we have some students that I reached out to the counselor and principals today that are at about 25 unexcused absences. So that's huge. You know, they have rarely been to school. So what do they need? One of the kids that we reached out to last week from Post, finally the mom is like, you know, he's just not ready to come back to in-person. What other option is there? And so then getting him signed up to AOP. So the other report I pull once a month is the 20-day unenrolled. So we have 10 students right now that have unenrolled due to the 20 days of attendance, and we don't know where they are. So that's another thing I reach out to the counselors as well as the principals to say, hey, do you have any update on these students? When I did that last month, we actually found some students that were in Alaska, but one of the students had gone to Weston. That school had reached out to Cindy Bradley Reynolds, which wasn't there any longer. So that email got lost. And so I'm not wanting it just to be like, well, they're 20-day unenrolled, we don't know where they are. Let's really try to find these students and how we can support them. So, or where they're at, right?
What about excused absences? Did you touch on that? And I missed that?
Well, so that the elementary, there is law around excessive excused absences that we can file truancy on, because I mean, we have a couple of students that are up to about 20-day excused absences in their first grade. It's not their fault, right?
Sure.
We need to reach out to these families and really tell them, you need to get your child to school, or we're going to go to court with them. There's excuses. They're sick. Nobody's that sick that much.
Sure.
You know, so
Right,
yeah,
right,
so
yeah.
we can also do secondary excused absences if we're filing, if we're seeing a pattern there.
Sure. At any grade level, right?
Right.
Whoever,
Yeah.
okay.
We really focus on the elementary with Excuse
Sure.
though, and not so much secondary, just because elementary is a family problem.
Sure.
And then
But I mean, secondary, if they're excused, they're not gonna need credit for graduation. So I'm
Exactly.
saying-
Yeah.
Who usually reaches out at the building level to these families? Is it the principal or the school counselor?
Either the counselor or the registrar, the attendance secretary. It usually starts probably with the attendance secretary, and then if we don't see that problem getting resolved and the student coming back, then it'll go to that next level.
And do you think parents are made aware of, especially let's say kindergarten or first grade parents do they know, do they have the understanding of what it means? Is there clarity when they're enrolling? This is the
Yes.
expectation and.
There's a contract they sign,
So they know this.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want.
and then we just reiterate that when we talk with them and meet with them,
Okay, so they know the ground.
for sure. The other area
That's right.
is discipline focus that I oversee. I meet with assistant principals quarterly, especially this year, because we have a number of new assistant principals. Just ongoing data collection around this. I had a really good question when I presented this to Ace the other night, as far as what are we doing proactively to really build social emotional learning in our students. So I wanted to touch on that. So we do have a universal screener that Carl Olson has been working with our care team in our elementary buildings around. And they give that 3 times a year. And then the counselors connect with the care team and try to figure out what groups do we need to start so that we can address some of and give students some strategies and build their toolkits so that they are able to regulate their behavior more so than they are right now. And then at the middle school level, we're using the HOPE scores, which we talked about last year around the science of hope and the HOPE survey to really build hope back into students, because that's what we found. If you have low hope, you're more than likely to drop out of school. So what can we do at the middle school level to really build hope back into our students' lives? And then from there, really focusing on best practices across and that consistency across our buildings. So what one school is suspending a student for, the other school is the same or not suspending a school for. So building their toolbox as far as what other interventions can you put into play here before just suspending students. So really trying to get that consistency across the buildings, which helps when we meet with assistant principals to have that conversation. And then, we have had an increase in student threat assessments the last couple of years, and that still has continued to be this year. So, and what I like to say around that is sometimes it's not specifically a direct threat on a group of students or a student or staff. Sometimes they're just choosing to bring things that could be a threat to our school. So really addressing that, which is a good eye opener for families as well. This is your student brought this to school. They usually don't have any idea about that. So. Oh, the other thing that we're getting alignment on is our offense code. So when I pulled data last year for the board as well as for ACE, I was noticing that some schools were using, say, disruptive conduct. Another school was using maybe inappropriate disruption, right? So that's really the same thing. So let's get rid of one of those codes so that across the system, we're all using the same one. So then that's easier for us to really look at that data in the spring as far as what's happening in our buildings. Right, counselors is another group that I oversee starting this year. So I meet with them every month. And what we're doing is on a Friday afternoon, I'll pull secondary counselors for an hour. We'll talk about issues that are happening at the secondary level. Elementary joins them. We have a combined counselor meeting for an hour. And that's when we're really focusing on the comprehensive school counseling program, which we'll be bringing to you in the spring to adopt a transition plan. The focus there is really using the counselor frameworks aligned to state learning standards, and they're looking at what data they're collecting, which is that universal screener that we'll be able to use, as well as the HOPE scores, and then how they're using their time and how they're using their personnel. Because really we want them to be 80% direct services to students, 20% indirect where they're doing other things to support the school. And so they are collecting their use of time 3 times a year, which they did last year as well. And then looking at that across the system. And then also looking at how to infuse the science of hope, which is around that Hope Navigator project we did last year within that plan. And then working on a more team approach to 504s, right? So not just a counselor running this whole 504, but what does the 504 say and who needs to be a part of that team to do what's best for the kid. So working on all of those things with counselors this year. Student support advocates, these started in our buildings last fall. So we have 2 student support advocates. Those 2 support 4 of our schools on a weekly basis. Travis Booch is at the high school full time, and then Rachel Miller spends time between Post and Stille Valley and Weston. But then they also support other schools on a need basis. So Eagle Creek called the other day wanting some help with rent, so that Rachel Miller was able to reach out to that family. So they're not just tied to those 4 schools, but they are able to support. They do everything from getting counseling for students, mental health support, gas, rent, clothing, medical appointments. They do a slew of things. They're really there to support the student and the family. They're not necessarily counselors, right? So that's where we have to keep kind of that separate. But yeah.
Was that one of the grants that we got?
Yeah, so they're paid for through the hospital district, I believe. Yes, there's lots. What? Snohomish County. Okay, thank you, Snohomish County. Been a lot of grants that have come through for.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we have that for the whole year.
Yeah. And their calendar year runs January to December. So that's how that works. The grants that you approved the other day were the mental health counselors that I think I forgot to mention that are in all of our buildings except for 1. And then we have a telehealth counselor that can support any of our secondary students, especially those students that are having a hard time coming to school. We don't want to tie up that schedule for that mental health counselor during the day. So they're able to reach out to students that are just at home.
So in December is.
We'll renew. So we'll be bringing another grant approval for you in probably February, because it'll restart in January. It's when their calendar year. And then last but not least, just continue supporting building administrators in all of those areas of attendance, discipline, equity issues that surface throughout the day. Any questions from me? All right, yep.
You're welcome. A lot of really good stuff.
I'm writing the list. I'm
It's like 2, 3, 4, 5. A huge long list of amazing things that we're doing to help you. Next step is, do you want to introduce the next? Go for it. Okay, so next up is another Carrie. It's Carrie Knight. It's Carrie Henderson Burke, our Executive Director of Teaching Learning, to talk about Teaching and Learning District Improvement Plan.
Thank you so much.
So,
I can't remember.
This one. Okay, so teaching and learning, as you know, has a number of departments. So the first goal that we're going to look at for the DIP for this year is brace yourself about universal design for learning. So by the end of the year, the goal is to have a 5-year implementation plan ready to roll. We've spent last year building conceptual awareness and purpose. We're moving on this year into some lesson planning templates and time to support teachers as they remove barriers before they become issues in the way they plan their instruction. But there's a lot to uncover and a lot to spend time with, and a lot of needs to become aware of as we move forward with our UDL implementation. So the action plan for this year is to go on field trips, right? We'll have a leadership team that visits UDL model schools. We're lucky our secondary crew, 12 people, is going to go on Monday, December 12th to visit a school in Monroe.
And so we'll get to visit classrooms and have some time to speak directly to teachers that are farther ahead on the journey than we are. So elementary, unfortunately, is on a wait list. I don't know if we can get into an elementary this year. UDL is a statewide focus, and so we're not the only ones saying we need a field trip. The number one question that our staff asked last year as we were building the concept is, how does this actually work in a classroom? Right? Okay, we get the concept. It's a good concept. What does it look like with actual children? So we spent a lot of time looking for video resources, didn't find any really that were good enough to take up teacher time, right? So we did some of our own videoing with our own practitioners, and it was great, but having a whole school model, very exciting. Anyway, so we'll do that by January. Definitely gonna get that done on schedule for secondary and middle school. We might have to, or elementary, we might have to explore some other routes. So,
What are some of the closer elementary UDL ones that you would like to tour?
well, that's a great
Given
question.
the opportunity.
Because I don't fully know the answer to that question. We are starting at kind of a Snohomish County Teaching and Learning Network group so that we can start comparing notes and saying who else in our surrounding districts is doing this and how can we capitalize on each other's work and learn from each other without having to go too far. The model school that we're on a wait list for is down in Seattle, which is not insurmountable, but
Sure.
it's an impact, and we can't empty our schools of all their administration. That's never a good plan. So if we can find a school closer, we won't wait till next year for sure for our elementary group.
Awesome.
Yeah. Also working with building principals and the UDL leadership team, of course, to develop what the implementation plan actually includes after we go on our field trip. And then finally gathering input from stakeholders, which includes teachers, parents, kids, administration, so that we're sure that what we plan is effective, realistic, and impactful on student learning. So that's the teaching and learning part of the teaching and learning. Goal. Any questions on that? Okay. Next up, we have CTE. The CTE DIP goal for this year is largely a continuation of the work that Brian has begun. Probably starting about 3 years ago, 2 years ago, it was a hard push to really surface repeatedly the importance of 21st century skills. All of CTE is based on 21st century skills, but really bringing that into the forefront of what courses we offer and why, what's the market for them, what are the benefits. So Brian would like to weave that in with career readiness, of course, and intentional use of the high school and beyond plan, which is designed to help kids know what to do after they graduate, of course, but it's not valued necessarily as that tool, right? The danger of any plan is that it's seen as a requirement to fulfill and not a purposeful document to guide decision making and actions and learning. So he will work with his teaching staff on embedding the skills and identifying how practical they are for kids, and then ensuring that the programs reflect the diversity of the school. So these are kind of spelled out. This is the summary. These are how it's spelled a little bit more so. So 21st century rubric reviews. What does 21st century skill look like in culinary? What does that mean? Which includes some business, right? It's not only about cooking, it's also about ordering and processing and planning. So ensuring that our courses are thorough. High school and beyond planning, working specifically with Lisa Rodino, the school work coordinator. So there's that person to connect the plan to the practical application of it with local businesses like that. And then using advisory boards to recognize and analyze disproportionality data in program. Is there a group that's underrepresented in our program? Girls tend to be underrepresented in CTE programs. It's not just an Arlington thing, but it's something to be aware of and something to work towards, right? Is there a group that's overrepresented? Sometimes special education, students served in special education are overrepresented in CTE programs. So I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but it's something to be aware of and something to question more deeply as we look at it. So making sure that we're serving all in CTE programs. Yes.
Okay, so up there on the top, it says by the end of the school year, precision exams 20% of success skills assessment score will rise from a 45% to 65%. Is that the number of kids taking the test, or is that the grade of the test?
Grade. Yeah.
And is that an increase or is that a change?
It represents a desired growth trajectory. This is
So
an
right
example.
now, it's currently at 45% that are passing. Ish.
They're not our only measure of success. So, yeah,
And what
but
does
yes.
that, what does that score tell us when they pass that? And then they get a certificate,
Kids that
they
meet
get a job?
kids that meet industry standard. So growth rate. Next up, we have categorical programs. Carl Olson is focusing this year particularly on English language learners. So if you know anything about Carl, you know he has a particular brilliance with budgeting. So he's quite creative. If you ever walk into his office, either spend time looking at the whiteboard or put blinders on, because it's a very thorough, complicated plan. I usually have to take a nap after we walk through. But Carl, with EL students, particularly at the secondary level, F rates have been his primary measure of progress, right? So the first action goal to decrease the F level, F rates, is funding. And that is, where are they going to come from? Carl manages more grants than anybody else in this district. So he has to be creative and he has to know what his grants cover, and he has to use them strategically. Grants don't get raises, right? They're not a pot of money. So staff accessing grants get raises. So he's had to do quite a bit of shifting, which is okay. I don't mean that as a criticism. It's just a budgeting reality. And thank God we've got Carl managing that budget. So he's looking at TBIP funds for the high school EL teacher, 0.83 funding through TBIP, and 0.8 for elementary through TBIP, transitional bilingual instructional program. Sorry.
That was my question.
Great. Carl also provides a great deal of professional development. He meets with his teachers and his paraeducators really regularly. So WIDA standards are English language development standards. So there's always learning to go on, or deepening our understanding of what we're looking at to show kids are making progress. Elevation strategies. Elevation is a data platform that actually Terry Bookie brought on board her last year in this position. Brought on as data tracking because we are required to track really carefully how our English language learning students are progressing. But along with it is a strategy component. So the data component we've got, but it carries a lot of teaching suggestions that are really sound about how to support kids that are progressing at the level that we want. So changing an emphasis from learning about the data component to strategies component. Formative assessments, and again, continued participation in an EL cooperative. That's a continuation goal. Action 3 is about newcomer supports. We typically, somewhere in the general vicinity of 90% of English language learners are actually born inside the United States. So most kids who come to us with English as a second language really speak it pretty fluently, because this is the culture in which they live. Newcomers were, when you have a K-12 system, and we never quite know where newcomers are arriving from. We're never quite sure what their backgrounds are. So newcomers are always an area really to look at for improvement. So looking at how do we support kids that are brand new to English in this big sprawling system. We have big schools. It's a little different in secondary when there are class periods also. So his energy has gone towards secondary with newcomers specifically. Then last but not least, a continuation goal from last year, and that is the parent English class at our high school, which is a continuous joy. 25 or so parents participating. It's really, I got to substitute teach in there a couple of weeks ago, and I was euphoric for the rest of the week. It's really a wonderful place to be and run very much like a typical classroom. There was a large group lesson about sentence structure. There were examples, and then we broke into small groups and we practiced the skills that the mini lesson was about. It was good. Those are the goals in EL. Any questions about that?
Right, how many newcomers you get, like how often is that?
It's usually a pretty small number. I'd have to look at the data, but more than 10 would be out of character a year over the span of a year.
Part of it, yeah, just wondering what type of number.
Yeah.
Carrie, it's wonderful you got to substitute in there. My first question is, how did that come about? Was that like part of the process that you want to do that so you are more involved with it? Or is that just like, we didn't have anybody and it fell to you?
A little from column A, a little from column B. I've gone to several classes before to observe and understand what goes on. We happened to be short-staffed on the night that I was called on to substitute. So,
Okay, good, awesome.
okay, last but not least, we have technology. So our other goals are largely, from our other departments, largely continuations of work that's already started. This goal is not surprising, but it's also pretty new, and that's because Matt is new in his first year. So his goal is centered around creating a technology advisory committee and the 3-year tech plan. So by the end of November, he'd like to have the team up and running, or at least up and scheduled. They would, when they start their focused work, they'll identify what's working from the existing plan. What do we keep, what do we change, and what do we get rid of? Then have it drafted by, what did we say, April, and then a final to the school board by June. So practical beginning point for our technology team. Any questions on it? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you, Carrie. Next up, we don't have a Carrie, we have an Erin.
Some of the same
Welcome,
letters.
Erin, to present the human resources. Erin is our executive director of human resources.
I just got one slide.
I got it for you.
So yeah, HR, these, we haven't changed them a ton. HR, we're working to really support teachers, support our workforce, keep everybody working together well. We believe that leads to positive student outcomes. Our employees are happy, and our kids are going to generally be happier. So we've got some things that we're working on this year. Obviously, we're trying to recruit and hire positive, productive people, top shelf type folks. We have had a challenge with our classified employees this year, honestly, trying to hire and substitutes. You mentioned various subbing. We've actually had more of a shortage in our classified subbing this year than our certificate. So that's one of the things we're trying to do. We have paraeducator training that's required, passed in 2019. So I've been really focusing on that this year. I've been around to all the buildings now, meeting with our paraeducators, trying to get them going on the training. Yes.
How do they like the requirements? I mean,
Our paraeducators.
yeah, were they happy that there was these new requirements or?
I would say generally no. But they are coping with it. People are trying to figure it out. It is very confusing because there's lots of different steps and lots of things. So that's why I've been going around each building. There's a website here. Help me. Gary. Get a website up on our webpage. They have a place to land and they can access all of the information there. So that's been fairly helpful.
And is it kind of like the required training that everybody does in the district where it's like a little video and then you take a little quiz?
Yeah, so there's some in-person required training. So we did that in the summer for our orientations. And then we contract with the ESD, who has put together a fundamental course of study program, which is basically just exactly like what you said, it's videos and some reading and short answer type things, interaction with that. So that's the fundamental course of study component. That's 28 hours. And then after that, it's a general certificate, which is 70 hours, which is basically embedded within PD that's happening around the district already. So at Eagle Creek or at Camp Prairie, we want those paraeducators to sign up for that training and do it along with teachers, which that's the great part of it. Honestly, that's I think that's beneficial for us. The fundamental course of study is kind of hoop jumping. Honestly, it's not that beneficial, I don't believe. But the embedded professional development in our district is excellent. That's good. So there are some good things. If I had my way, I'd get rid of FCS and keep the general certificate. No one asked my opinion. No. And lucky, I don't know why.
Work group.
Yeah.
Hey, darn it.
Yeah, so the second one's about emergency substitutes. We'll again have some emergency substitutes this year. I don't know if we have as great a need this year as we have in the past, at least last year. Because our numbers of open positions are not what they were. You know, last year we were up around 30 a day. With a lot of those being teachers, this year, the last couple of weeks, you know, we're under 10, but not, and most of those are classified. So we've been doing a lot better with our substitutes. So, you know, emergency, we try to stay away from that. We like to get the ones that are like maybe in a teaching program or have a bachelor's degree and maybe thinking about going into teaching. But so we're trying to, you know, kind of increase our rigor there with that. We've done some orientations already this year. And then the rest are about bargaining and, you know, positive relationships with our employee groups, which I think we've done pretty good with that. It's a lot easier this year, obviously, without COVID happening as much. So we've got through with our PSE was a challenge. We're trying to, you know, hopefully we have a full open bargain with PSE next year. So we want to try to get that going early. Some of it's out of our control. You know, it's not just the district, it's a two-way street. So we have to make sure that we're working with them proactively to try to get things wrapped up as soon as possible. That'll be a goal for us to try to get things wrapped up a lot sooner than this. That's it for me.
Any questions? Thank you, Eric.
You.
Next, we'd like to welcome Brian Lewis, who has had probably the most restful weekend ever. Our Executive Director of Operations, to talk to us about operations.
And before I get started, I do want to let everybody know we get out power back.
Yay.
Up here.
Ah.
Maintenance guys are checking systems, make sure that they're operational.
And Pioneer, you said?
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
And you're done then. Perfect. That sounds good.
Awesome.
I'm speaking about the operation, the improvement goal for this next year for 22-23, and it's completing the projects that we've got remaining on the capital projects levy. And those projects are HVAC controls update for Eagle Creek, Kent Prairie, and Weston High School. We are multiple generations behind for those control systems. And really, it's a bunch of technology related devices that open and close valves or vents or control that the heating systems, how hot will the boiler get or does it need to get, a whole range of devices that bring fresh air and heat into the classroom, hot water. So we've taken a little different track on this project and treated it as an information technology project rather than a construction project. And the RCW allows for a different process for bidding called a request for proposals. It's the same process that we use for the security improvements at the buildings, because it's really all about data being transmitted across the network. What this allows us to do is it allows us to pick the vendor that we want rather than the low bidder. And it's particularly important in terms of information technology management because we don't want multiple systems that we have to manage with multiple different update periods and different interfaces and different trainings for our staff that manage the system. So this will help us become more integrated in terms of control systems. There's still a competitive aspect to it, but it gives us the ability to be more selective of who is going to provide the systems for us. So the next project that's remaining is KP8, the Kent Prairie Site Traffic Safety, the queuing lane at the school. We resolved the permitting issues that we encountered last year. We plan on going out to bid in January or February for a June work start, so expect to see a contract coming from you for that work in February or March timeframe. I'll just let you know about the HVAC controls. People are publishing our advertisement November 9th, so on Wednesday morning. And well, we expect to bring you a contract in January or February as well. The last remaining levy project is the HVAC system at Weston High School. As we had originally envisioned it, what we encountered a pretty significant problem that would have required removal of the entire ceiling system at Weston High School and removal of all the existing duct work, new penetrations in the roof, new ducting systems, and it drove up the cost to almost $4 million. So we took a step back, re-examined what it was that we wanted to do with that work. Brought in our HVAC technicians, Al Haslow and Tony Hayes, and got their point of view on it and came up with a new plan, which we think will significantly reduce the cost and still accomplish the goal that we want to achieve. Now, all that being said, HVAC equipment is still 11 months out from work. So this is disruptive work, so we may not get that accomplished in the summer of 23. Might have to wait for purely driven by market forces.
And
Yes,
Brian, do we own or lease that building?
we lease that building.
Okay, that's what I thought. So, so it's incumbent on us to do repairs?
Yes, it is.
That's part of the lease.
Yes.
We do that as a city, right, for the airport.
The airport, which is its own district. So we lease it and we're kind of on the hook for any modifications.
Yes.
Kind of like the bus barn.
Yes.
Would we ever look at having a bricks and mortar type of building for Weston?
Yes.
The Facility Advisory Committee will be talking soon.
Yes.
So it's not included in the district improvement plan, but I thought I'd give you some information about the master facilities process that we're conducting right now. It's a 30-year look ahead, broken up into 5-year time periods, with the first 5-year time period starting in 2024. And that kind of question, we'll be addressing that question in the master facilities advisory committee. The process is pretty straightforward. Assessment of what the current condition of our buildings, what options do we have available to address the problems that we find in a decision. The committee will make a recommendation to the superintendent, and then we'll bring in bond advisors to give us an idea of what it will cost to finance that through either a capital levy or a bond. I can tell you right now, capital levy is just not going to do it. Resulting in $6,000 to $7,000 or $6,000 to $100,000 assessment, which would be very high. Tenable. So we're going to bring all that information to you in small chunks after we get the facilities or the master facilities plan finalized. We'll be bringing you a summary of that for your consideration, and then we'll be bringing a bond or levy proposal after that. That's my plan.
Yay for power to that. Next up, we'd like to welcome Peter Huebner, our Executive Director of Financial Services. And the district is all about.
Hello. I also only have one slide.
It's very
But
helpful.
it was full. I have to limit myself. The first on the list is, I think you've been hearing me talk about a new receiving software system to be implemented district-wide, comprehensive interfaces with our district software. And we are well into that process. We did over the last year at Arlington High School and the 2 middle schools. So at Arlington, it replaced the Blue Bear software that they had. And which was kind of a standalone system and is not being supported anymore by the provider of that. And we didn't have any access to it in the district office. So whatever that was happening in the high school was in a secret box. No, I'm just kidding. But the new software system that we have is we have access. We can run reports at any time and see anything that is going on in any of our schools. Anything that's been receipted and hasn't been deposited yet, it's all there. It's a very comprehensive system. And we're still working on fine tuning some of that, the pieces that went with that first, got to get it going, implementation. And we want to continue the implementation. Next step will be getting it in all our elementary schools. So we'll be working on that, hopefully start with them in January. And it's on its way. So a lot of the things that we do in finance aren't really optional. A lot of them are pretty much along the lines of legal compliance, internal controls, having best business practices, and having a balance, because you can't do everything always, but you need to make sure you've got your stuff going where you're most likely to have an issue. Receiving and soft is one of the places that are high focus for auditors. Next, this is a big one, our budget advisory task force. We are getting that going. This is the groundwork that we're laying for preparation of budget reductions for 23-24 budget. So we are on our way with having scheduled what meetings we're going to have. We've got the members that are going to participate in that, about 25 to 30 people. And thank you, our two board members, Mike, for representing and helping with the role for the board on that task force. We've got public forums scheduled, 3 of them also, and we are going to proceed on working on those presentations, and you'll be hearing a lot about that as we go. But that's a big one on the agenda. And next, it's my turn for all the board policies and procedures that are in the financial management area. Some of it's a little bit shared with Brian, some of those policies, but I'll be going through and updating those. So you may see me talking about policies and procedures at a lot of our board meetings, because it's my turn for my section strategically.
Yeah, the 6,000 series.
Yeah.
And the 4,000 this year.
So that's on for the improvement plans. Something really exciting is another GASB thing. Governmental Accounting Standards Board, GASB statement number 96. We just got done implementing GASB 87 about leases. I don't know if you remember me talking about that. So they have another one that has to be implemented for the next fiscal year. And it's similar to the leases, but this time it's about subscription-based information technology agreements. I think that's what SPITA, isn't that great? SPITA. It's about software purchases. So a lot of it might be along the lines of our curriculum when we have software subscriptions that go along with that, and they're renewed maybe over the course of 4 or 5 years. We have financial software subscriptions that we're part of, that those are pretty well going to be renewed almost every year, because it's not really a choice. Our financial software, we use it. We can't like just turn it off. And so this is about accounting recognition that's different than what we do right now. Right now, we're just like month annual expenses, boom, what it is. This will require us to book some kind of large liability that represents those out years. So it'll be very fun. And I have to amortize. Anyway, I don't want to, it's been fun, right? Have I said enough? Gatsby. Somebody that didn't know what it was, they called it Gatsby. I like that, the Great Gatsby. So that has to be done, or we will have an audit finding. So I don't want to do it, but I will.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I will say there is some pushback at the state level to continue to question, why do we have to continue to adopt these when we already have a little bit of a qualification on our audit opinions statewide. All school districts pretty much have a qualification in our audit opinions that say we don't do all of the full gap. We only do the governmental accounting standard boards, generally accepted accounting practices. We do some of them, not all. And that's because we do state regulatory accounting based stuff. Very similar to what's required by, but not the whole deal. So why are we doing these? Because it costs money and it takes resources, but that just sounds like fun.
What is the legal authority that tells us what things we have to do? Is it OSPI? Is it the state auditor's office?
It's
Is it?
multiple, it's
Oh,
OSPI, state auditors, but also this governmental accounting standard boards
They
framework.
don't like coordinate.
They do,
They do.
yeah, they do,
Oh, great.
but it's opposing voices, yeah. This one, the business services manual, that is a big job, and it is one that you'll continually see me talk about. We'll probably have to chunk it out, but it is our goal to have that, a total rewrite and total update of our business manual and have it online so that it's accessible as a resource for the fiscal folks and principals and anybody who wants to know how do we do this procedure, with purchase orders and banking and all that stuff. So that is financial services. So, are there any questions?
Thank you, Jean.
Thanks, Regina. Next up, we would like to welcome Gary Sable, voice of Arlington, the director of communication. There's something about communication.
And visual aids too. There we go. Very exciting, I know. Good evening, directors. I'm glad to be here tonight. You've seen this before. It's been expanded, the action plans a little bit. So the SMART goal is to improve frequency, variety, and accessibility of district communications by at least 10% by 2023, end of next year, as measured by reports, website, and social media metrics. So there are 3 action plans. So the first one is one that we're trying to get out in the community more to really let people know what our district does, because there are some in our community who, may not know, or they're either potentially homeschooling, private schooling, may just not know about the district. And so my goal and with others is to really build up that awareness. And so the action plan is to attend more community outreach events to increase awareness of APS. So this is my visual aid to show you tonight. Second to set this up. It's actually not that hard to set. That's what I was going to show you. It's my favorite. Well, that's right. I like visual aid.
Should I videotape this?
Yeah, no, probably not. I guess I messed it up. But
Changing the bar for the rest of the directors.
that's right. Exactly. Always doing it.
That's why we put him last.
Yeah, right. So you'll see. I mean, it's a very small, compact.
We can pull money out of it.
You'll see. Yeah, it's very exciting. So of course, I tried to find the cutest picture that I had, which is of course, kindergartners last year graduating to 1st grade. That's an important step. So and it really encompasses what we're all about. And the idea with this is starting the very youngest ages all the way to graduation. And so this pop-up banner is really designed like when you're at a trade show or an event. This is like your table. We have a tablecloth that's branded, so people know when they walk in, it's Arlington Public Schools. And so this is fairly new. Dr. Swing and I were at an event for the Silly Tribe.
Yeah, because we set up a resource table and everybody around kind of had something. And I told Gary, I think we need to have something.
Yes. So this is our visual. Let's just start with. We'll probably have more, but this is it really grabs your attention. It really, again, helps through the key pictures. But anyway, so this is to help supplement this goal action plan. And we did like a back to school fair. Like August time, Dr. Swing and I attended one with the Silly Tribe, in August too, maybe September, anyway, in the summertime. But it was great, very well attended. I think we got a lot of good information out there. It's also an opportunity to get free and reduced meal applications out there. just, handouts, different things, just to let people know what the district is doing. So that was kind of our goal for that one. Okay, second one, identify additional mediums to communicate important information district-wide. And this is more social media, and I finally, after 7 years, we're now on Instagram. For a long time, and we're calling it Instagram, and I will tell you what our what it's called, but it's and if you know anything about finding these things, you have to, they're all taken. So you have to really, so it's Arlington Public Schools, ARL WA, WA. Yeah, it's horrible. Anyways, so we are out there, we're getting, some, every time I post something on Facebook, it's we use Meta, I guess is what it's called now. Yeah, so it's both, it does it simultaneously, which is great. Anyway, so we are finally on Insta, I guess is what it's called. I don't know. So
TikTok.
So we're in it. It took me 7 years to get to Instagram. Go on. But anyway, so no rush into anything. And so those will be evaluated, Meta or Facebook, whatever. It has really good metrics, and they'll be shared with the board later in the year. So you'll see all those. And finally, if you've been in the bowels of our building, is where our archives room. It's like has pipes, and you hear water rushing in there. Different things like that. It's pretty interesting. But anyway, for years it's been a challenge to organize files. I'm also the records officer for the district, and so it's hard to do that. And Debbie and Brenda have been working. I know how hard you've been working, but they've been culling a lot of the records file, doing the destruction logs, really following that process. And so so my goal in the spring, every year that they come out, the archive, the Washington State Archives comes out with grants, and one of them is organizing the file room, and that's what I'm gonna apply for. So hopefully we can continue our great effort. So that's pretty much communications. Any questions? Yes.
Awesome idea. What does organizing the file room grant funding, what does that look like? Does that look like people? Does it look like electronic? What is that?
It's very specific. And now, so just to remind you, several years ago, we applied for one that scanned all of our permanent student records, and that was quite an expensive grant. We actually were successful to get that. So they have 3 different types of grants. There's that one, there's a digital one, like you could buy like a scanner or something. And then the third one is this organizing. And it's more for shelving, boxes, different things like that. Again, if you've been down there, it's a lot of file cabinets, which really isn't ideal for trying to find where something is. And so it's really, getting shelving and boxes and really helping us literally organizing your file room. So that's what it is.
And really kudos to Debbie and Brendan. I mean, they went through that room and
Over 125 boxes were shredded.
That's a lot.
Wow.
It's, yeah. Should take a field trip down there sometime. It's pretty exciting.
And Gary, do you have to keep hard copy of that, or are you getting it transferred to electronic?
A hard copy of what?
So with these files, with the data you have in there, are you maintaining that, or are you uploading it to a digital format?
So there are really 2 different types of records. One, maybe 60%, 70% of files have a retention period. So it can be anywhere from 3 years, 4 years, 6 years.
That you keep on site, that's.
or 100 years.
Copy. And then at the end of that retention period, you do a destruction log and they're destroyed. And the reason for that is when you get a public records request, that's, beyond the retention, you don't have anything to share. And that's what you want. You want to stay within the retention. There are some documents that are archival. And then a Washington State Archives rep will come out, look at your documents and determine whether or not they need to bring them to the state archives or if you can destroy them.
Okay.
And so different from student files, those are all scanned because those are 100-year files.
Okay.
And we don't want to lose those, obviously for many reasons, but yeah, so different than what we did with the parchment.
Okay, all right, good to know. So yeah, some you just have to keep, but you want it organized and at the ready, so you know what is our known picture, what is where will I find this?
Yeah, and Debbie's been working with all the departments who really, kudos, it's awesome. So,
Kind of like that master.
yeah, it's great, it really is great. All right, thank you.
Thanks.
I'm gonna keep the visual aid up here and let's take it away. Awesome.
Next up, thank you, Gary. Next up, we're gonna have Steve McKellar present his portion of the special services district improvement. Any visual aid?
So, yeah.
There's the
You know, they went all the way down to graduation. Yeah, we still serve students 18 to 21 in our system, in the transition program. Not part of my presentation tonight, but I was at this where there we have 21-year-olds in our system today. In fact, they have a new logo for transition. We've actually never had a logo, so we'll figure out how to get that out there. It's a takeoff of we have a hat, we call it a border board and different things. So anyway, got our coloration. Another thing I want to reference to is on attendance. Students, I'm jumping back for something Carrie shared. Students with disabilities, 504 or IEP, between the 2nd and the 7th unexcused absence, IEP teams must, or 504 teams must have a meeting with families to talk about the barriers. And I think if it's after 10 days of unexcused cumulative in a year, that if a child is suspected with disability, although we have a child fine obligation for that anyway, but if after those 10 days we can identify something, we have an obligation to consider evaluation for special education. So attendance laws just don't impact, well, they do impact generally every student, but then there's even other barriers to remove barriers. There's other layers built in for students on IEPs. Last year, the special ed department, I wear two hats in a sense. I have health services is one of my responsibilities, which is Krista Kramer, which she basically tells me how to help her run the district because she can do it all by herself. But last year we decided for, if you recall, our district improvement plan was under health services, and our goal was to create a health service resource guide, which we actually created. It's on our webpage, and it has, we were coming out, if you recall, starting last year, coming out of COVID, coming out of the hybrid, coming out of a lot of those different things, and everybody was saying social emotional health is going to be big. And I think we're really even, last year was big. I think this year we're still feeling the after effects of that. And so we created a health services guide. You helped Krista develop a Padlet. So there's a Padlet. If you don't know what Padlets are, it just has health promotion, crisis help, social emotional, community resources. And then you can just scroll down those to find all these different resources that are out there. We drew together both the district nurses and our counseling staff across the district to talk about, we just never had a place where all this information was located. Everybody had a piece of something here and there. And so we just created this resource, which was part of the district improvement plan for health services last year. So I just want to say that it was a one-year goal. We set it in the fall, and we accomplished it in May, I think, of this year, before school let out. We got it up there and up and running, and Gary's helped us get that out there as well. So that was last year. This year, we're Carrie, 2-3 years. We're pushing into the inclusionary practices project in our district. So you've heard a lot about this. COVID kind of got in the way of that. Right after we started in January with the project, we went home in March, and we didn't see each other for a while and came through all of that. And we've been slugging it through, and we feel like we're starting to get back some traction now. But one of the things that we've never really thought about was how do we measure the effectiveness of it, especially for students in my situation, students identified with disabilities. And so by June 2024, the 2-year goal right now, the special education department will identify measures and data points to support effective inclusionary practice decisions at the district and building level. And so the basis of the thought here was that how do we really measure the impact of it? When we went back in January of 19 or 20 to listen to Katie Novak, who is pretty much leading WASA and our team throughout this whole process, she's out of Groton, Massachusetts. And she said 90% of her students with disabilities were included, their least restrictive environment in the gen ed setting in her school district. And it's Groton, there's Groton, the hoity-toity private school, but Groton, Massachusetts, its own public system. It's a big district. And 90% of their students identified with disabilities were included in general education
over 80% of the time, which is the classification for least restrictive environment, LRE1. So the state measures, or the federal government even measures, how much our kids are included in gen ed. 32nd primary. To be in special education, once you're identified, IDEA presumes that you start in your home school, your boundary school, in the gen ed classroom. Presumes that you have an IEP, great, you start there. You don't start going through the process and go, oh, this child kind of looks like a life skills type of student. And so we start thinking about that. No, we go back to identifying them, and then we look at them from there and we start moving back to the least restrictive environment. If it means we can support them in the building or in that classroom by pushing in, by supporting them, whatever that takes. So inclusionary practices is that. How do we support students in the general ed environment? Putting a student with disabilities in a gen ed environment is just called inclusion. You just included them. If you don't provide support, that's not inclusionary practices. And so, so that's where we're heading with all of this. And it's not just special education, but students on the margins everywhere. And how is it that we are or are not serving them in the gen ed situation? And then we look at that. 4 years ago, 3 years ago, Washington State, I don't know who told them, maybe the federal government, but for LRE1, which means least restrictive environment, LRE1 is 80% or more of your day is spent in general education. So think of 80%, that's a lot of time in your day. So that's LRE1. We found out that Washington State was 4th from the bottom of all states for including students in the general ed environment in LRE1. 4th from the bottom, right? All those other states were doing a much better job than Washington State. And that's where inclusionary practices, I think, really got its, people started waking up and realizing we've got some work to do. I've got lots of opinion about special education, and I think the professionalization of it, we got to back away from those things because we've removed the responsibility for all kids from all teachers. And we've only said certain teachers can work with these students. And so that's kind of what the state, kind of what we're doing, is to undo that idea. So to get to the action plan, the goal is to review and organize base district math data, district math and reading data from STAR, iReady for the students in 4th, 7th, and 10th grade. We're trying to establish a baseline. We have various groups, teachers, grade levels, buildings, all doing different things that have UDL, Universal Design for Learning, inclusionary practices. They're trying these out in different ways. And so, but it's not consistent across our system yet. So everybody's trying something, but we're not trying the same things always. And so we'll get there eventually. But by just looking at some baseline data for those 3 grade levels, and then trying to establish moving forward from there, what's the correlation between students who may have had some kind of inclusionary practices encounter or experience or their LRE compared to what they're doing on these scores, STAR and iReady for math and reading. We're going to look at reviewing the least restrictive environment increases during the past 3 years. So our elementary schools by nature have had probably average pre-COVID. We're in the 74, 76% of all of our students were in LRE1 in elementary school. And that kind of makes sense. You have a resource room and kids are going out for a few minutes and coming back. And that went from 74 till we got to middle school and it just nosedived down to 25, 33%, somewhere right in there. And when you look at it, you realize right away the reason that happens is because we're no longer in this, a regular ed classroom, a gen ed classroom with a teacher and 20-some students, 25, 30, 36, back in Christmas Day, right? 36, 36. Anyway, and so we look at that class size and we realize that, I got lost in my thought here. Oh, so they're all together, they might be pulled out or whatnot, but when you go to the or the middle school, now all of a sudden you have periods. It's a funny thing that happens at middle school. A child who might need 20 minutes of math support in elementary now needs 47 minutes or 51 minutes. What does that sound like? The length of a class period. Do all students who qualify in math need 51 minutes of math for their LRE? For STI, specially designed instruction? Well, no, it's what we've created. and I'm not picking on, this is go across Washington State, look across America, right? We've created these periods where we put special ed teachers in charge of content, math, reading, writing, those types of things. So then, and then by the time you got to the high school, the numbers started climbing up a little bit again. Just coming out of COVID, a lot of our secondary schools started implementing co-taught classrooms. So we're putting a special education endorsed teacher in with a general ed teacher into the same classroom, a math class. Could be a math content teacher, let's say, and they together would put, then there'd be a group of students identified with a disability in math would be included with general ed students in that environment. And there you have, and then what happened to their LRE is we also started saying, do they really need the 51 minutes or could they be provided specially designed instruction for 20 minutes? And okay, well then, but the rest of that time is in a gen ed setting anyway. So it starts getting complicated when you start looking at it that way. So all just by changing co-taught at secondary, really being thoughtful about how many minutes of SDI were needed in that period, all of a sudden our LRE numbers started going up, getting towards LRE 1. So that's a good thing, but that's only called first order change. Because we've created the structure for it, we've created the system for it, but what's really truly happening in those co-taught classrooms? We don't know. I mean, what's happening? Are they co-planning? Katie Novak says, if you're not co-planning, you're not co-teaching. Well, do they have the same planning period? Do they have, right? So it starts getting, again, more complicated. So we're going to look at the LRE for the last 3 years, and then we're going to base it forward and start monitoring what happens there. Identify and compare using district assessments, STAR and iReady, students in middle and high school level, that here it is calling out the co-taught, just to see. We have one middle school that has co-taught classrooms right now today. We have another middle school that doesn't. And so that's going to give us some information. We're going to look at that and see if we can find some information out of that to help us make these decisions up here. And then lastly, identify and compare annual disproportionality data provided by the state to identify trends within marginalized groups of students to see if there's a causal relationship between inclusionary practices, to see if that can be identified. I don't know. It's going to be an interesting journey, just looking at that data and see if we can start making some links. Again, all in purpose of serving us being able to make decisions at the district level and building levels as far as inclusionary practices. Go ahead. Yes.
How many students, like ballpark number, how many right now do we send out of our district for special ed?
5.
And how many ballpark kids do we have in special ed?
867.
That's pretty small percentage.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And what kind of resources do we not have that we're having to send kids to those programs?
3 of our students, 2 are at NRLC, which is EFD runs a behavior program for Snohomish County. Well, actually now it includes Skagit County because that program collapsed. And so that's at our Western campus. You see those portables out by 172nd, that's the EFD, that's their portables. They own those. That's through the cooperative for the ESD. So NRLC and then Discovery are 2 programs, same campus, same director, different teachers. Discovery is self-contained more. NRLC is for your older groups, high school age. So we have 2 at NRLC, 2 in Discovery, 1 at NRLC. We have 1 student at Overlake Specialty School in Redmond, which is mental health. We don't have time for me to talk about mental health in Washington State because it's broken. We really have no services for kids. And that's the last stopgap. If Overlake said we can't serve the student anymore, there's nowhere else to go, maybe out of state. And we had that happen 2-3 years ago. We had a student out for about 1.5 years and then aged back in. In Washington State, 13 years old, you get to decide if you want mental health services or not. And the moment you say, no, I don't, then there's no law that allows anybody to intervene for that child. So, and then 1 at Northwest School of Innovative Learning. That's in Redmond, one's in Bellevue. Anyway, they overlap. And that's, again, high needs, high lots of behavior, mental illness, things like that.
I had a question about the tests, the STAR and the iReady. And I wondered if there was any communication with the teachers, if they were seeing that what they were getting from those tests was actually accurate with schoolwork in the classroom. And the accommodations for the tests, what that looks like, and if it's limited, and who limits what accommodations are, you know, the STAR and iReady say you can only have these types of accommodations. And so,
I have no data to tell you today
Okay.
what that looks like, but those are all things that, and it's, you know, especially when we get to, there's only one alternative state test, it's called WAAIM. And so it's basically Washington, OSPI tells us that 1% of your student population can take the WAAIM. And it's basically an assessment that the teacher creates. And we're talking our students who are in our life skills program, severely, profoundly impacted, multiple disabilities, non-communication, you know, their communication is non-existent or very limited. And so they're clearly not going to take the SBA, right? I mean, so teacher creates it, teacher administers it, teacher scores it. And that's 1%, right? And so a couple of years ago, we had a few kids in our ERC program, extended resource room. They were advocating to take it. I was back and forth arguing with the principal, and I finally said, "Oh, go ahead. There's no ERC or there's no police, you know, for this lying." And like within a week, I got a letter from the police for lying that said you're at 1.5%. It wasn't because of that particular case, but I thought how ironic. I said, "Who's watching? Okay, fine. You know what's best for your kid in your building. Go ahead." And we were cited for being over by 0.5, and we since we're under that now. We're okay. But those are interesting things to think about and ponder about and ask questions about. But these are what we're going to try and find out in all this information and what's happening. But the ESPA, teachers, kids are frustrated, you know, to have to take it because they automatically, well, anyway. Never mind. It's frustrating, but OSPI, from what I've known, they understand that it's a testing environment. They just want to know. They know students will not pass it. They just know, but they want to assess across boards, across districts. Are you all finding the same numbers? Are you all finding, you know, that? So they have a heart. I mean, they're not.
And for STAR and iReady, Carrie, I think you were gonna say something about that. I know, I saw you.
There's a couple of them going on at the same
STAR and iReady are not the only assessments that teachers rely on, right? Teachers rely on. We really try to overemphasize that. It's not used for grading, it's for understanding. It's our right progress. I think that's most important. We would never take an assessment, particularly a standardized assessment, over what a teacher sees. Okay. They should inform each other. Schoolwork should inform STAR should inform work. But yeah, and there are what accommodations are available on STAR and iReady. We have turned on, for example, what they're both timed tests, which we can turn off, right? So it's still technically considered a timed test because you can time out technically after however, you know, but we do have accommodations. And there are not a lot of accommodations available, but what is available? No.
All right, no further questions for Dave McCully. Okay, so the next part of our board meeting, our study session tonight is the fun part. I know you've all been really excited about it, and that's our recording activity. And I know everybody's like memorized their lines, and I don't know about you, but we have no power, and there was limiting opportunity. Look at anything electronic. So are we gonna do this one at a time, like kind of?
Yeah, so what we'll do is Gary's set up over there. He has a teleprompter. I will give you each your sheet and you
Oh,
can
and so
kind
you
of,
want to share, you said you had a teacher that reached out to you about one of our goals and you wanted to share that. Was that the one you wanted to share tonight?
I'd like to review it if you have.
They'll give you each one. And then have the number of what the tree go.
Yes. That's what we have. Pretty minimal. I did.
Hold on. Yama, we got right.
You're welcome. And like, I went to the office about my shower.
Spanish ends there.
Okay, the other thing is, I think maybe practice this one time.
And we run through it.
Yeah, we'll
Without
practice it
recording.
one time.
Ooh, lighting.
And then when the individuals are recording, I'm gonna hand out, for those that are gonna do the WASD presentation, I've got that outline. And then I've created well, Debbie did this, with notes, and I want you to kind of think of your talking points. when you kind of get this.
So a quiet activity. That you will need to be quiet.
Right. So there are numbers. So we start with Mary and then we end with Mary. So we'll just practice here and then we'll do one by one. Okay, Mary, I'll let you start.
Hello, my name is Mary Ledeck. I was elected as a school board director in November of 2019. I represent Director District Area 4, which includes South and Central Arlington, Round Ridge, part of Gleneagle, Bolton, and the area out past Bernard and Mecklenburg. I'm currently serving as board president, and I also serve as the board representative to the Advisory Council for Education. This video's purpose is to share about the roles and responsibilities of the school board team and provide highlights of our district strategic plan. The Arlington School Board consists of 5 elected community members, 1 from each of the 5 director districts, 2 student advisors, and the superintendent. Even though the board and superintendent have different roles and responsibilities, they serve the same purpose to support student learning and achievement of every student in Arlington. The board governs the district, which means identifying what is to be done Okay, board, we're gonna take a
Yeah.
little break, and we're gonna, everybody's gonna be able to take a chance to go to the bathroom if they need to. And then we'll be.
Speed it up. See,
start
right,
getting
the right arrow
everybody.
speeds it up.
welcome everybody back from our break. We're gonna do some more video recording activities. Welcome back. We are wrapped up with our recording session. And next meeting will be next Monday, November 14th at the district office building at 6 p.m. And with that, I want to remind everybody to vote tomorrow. This deadline. And do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. And Director Ray, he's left. Director Kelly, also his left. Director Kingman.
Aye.
President Levesque. Aye. Director Knapp. Aye. And we are adjourned. Drive safe. Enjoy your pool tomorrow.
That was kind of fun.